Hey guys, what are we doing? Must everything popular be struck down by trolls, dragged through their pits of drama and scandal, then thrust into the outrage mill so it can be poured out into the content slop trough, which we so aptly call the feed? It's making me sick to watch as Critical Role's new game, Daggerheart, is being so swiftly torn apart over such a foolish and small piece of its publication. But perhaps I was naive in my most recent video, The Downfall of D&D Clickbait Scandals, to assume that the D&D content-hungry trolls would not instantly sink their teeth into the next big thing. So I make this video to do what I must do in a time like this for my own sanity and maybe yours. Let's untangle this alleged drama as best as we can. Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to have more fun playing RPGs together, and we will return to the playful as soon as we possibly can. First, the clickbait scandal claim. Critical Role's game license is as bad or worse than the D&D OGL, which, for a brief reminder, was the perpetual, air quotes there, game license used by third-party D&D publishers for about 20 years until D&D tried to change it in a way that would have ruined thousands of small businesses, from smaller publishing studios to many, many independent designers. And it's crucial to state that at the time of writing this video, none of the people making this claim that Critical Role's Daggerheart license is worse than the OGL, to my knowledge, none of them are lawyers, so they technically probably do not know what they're talking about, and technically, neither do I. And I admitted as much in my other recent video where I briefly highlighted my own apprehensions about this license. It's a little disappointing that Daggerheart didn't learn from D&D's recent license controversy and just use Creative Commons or even follow Shadowdark with a tiny license in the book. Instead, you gotta search online for an 8-page PDF of legal jargon with some sections about termination that my non-lawyer brain raises an eyebrow at. That is still my honest feeling about this Daggerheart license. Something is off, they could have done better, but no one needs to be grabbing a pitchfork here, and if you're going to anyway, did you see that one? That one was very close. No one needs to grab a pitchfork here, but if you're going to, at least point it at the few parts of this license that could harm the people using it and the game's community, instead of at one section that is both completely standard and only harmful in a ridiculous, hypothetical situation, because that's the scandalous part, apparently. So in a moment, we'll explain the parts of this license that I think could have been more creator-friendly, but why it's not nearly as bad as what almost happened with the D&D OGL after this brief word from one of Critical Role's own sponsors, Chepeku. Happy to have them as a sponsor here because Chepeku is renowned for their thousands of fantasy maps with animated versions and tons of variants on Patreon, but now on Chepeku's own website, you can get their 6,000 plus maps and 2,000 plus scenes and 300 plus tokens like my own Orc Barbarian Hantu with the token builder tool to build your own. Yeah, you can get all 3 of those subscriptions for the price of 2 in their complete fantasy bundle. Personally, I think the website is a level up in terms of navigating to find exactly what I'm looking for, like this animated western scene as the perfect backdrop for my Daggerheart Colossus of the Drylands campaign. And always a plus, the website means more of your dollar goes directly to the creators of this amazing library of artwork. So check out the Chepeku Complete Fantasy Bundle with my link below so they know who sent you. Alright, as we summarize the Daggerheart license from a non-lawyer's perspective, let's compare it to what I consider to be the gold standards of bespoke TTRPG licenses as established by Shadowdark. 1. The license is in the rulebook. 2. It's one page in plain language. 3. It's clear on what game content to use and how. And 4, it doesn't claim ownership of anything you create with it. So number 1, the Daggerheart license is not in the core rulebook. That's less convenient for sure, but it's not inconvenient to just search for it online, and that makes sense when we recall the Daggerheart license has sections about terminating and updating it, which are what my non-lawyer brain raises an eyebrow at, so we'll come back to that later. 2, the Daggerheart license is not one page, and the legal jargon is a mixed bag, but most of it looks like this. Nothing in this license constitutes permission to assert or imply that you or your use of the public game content is connected with or sponsored by or endorsed by DRP and Critical Role. So, number 3, the Daggerheart license does seem clear about what game content to use and how. But before we get to the ownership, termination, and the scandalous parts, I want to break down my not legal advice interpretation of using this license as a video creator and as a writer, and thus why this license might not matter at all. So my non-lawyer brain jumps to 4.2 commercial, because my Daggerheart videos would be monetized on YouTube, and here's the instructions for audio/video work. On the material, the copyright and attribution must be visible for a time or read in its entirety. Pause there. So, in a video about Daggerheart, I'm supposed to show this legal disclaimer on the screen for a time, as it says here. And if I were running a podcast, I'd have to read this text aloud, which implies that I can't just paste it into the description. No, it must be part of the content. Okay. And the second sentence says, I must also include certain logos on my video thumbnail. And lastly, for video, when I check their definition for public game content, I think this means that all video and podcast creators can only reference and show materials from the free, non-illustrated Daggerheart SRD, not from the actual core rulebook. Now, I'm not aware of any other TTRPG requiring that level of distinction between official and third-party video and audio content, but it's not a deal breaker for 2 reasons. 1, because I can pretty easily understand and follow those instructions, and 2, because I know for a fact that 99% of people making Daggerheart videos and podcasts will not follow those instructions because they will never read this license. And then Darrington Press is not going to cease and desist hundreds of creators. So these requirements won't be enforced, and therefore they won't be enforceable if Darrington suddenly decided to enforce them. And I have a perfect example for that. Let's talk about writers. If you're hoping to publish written Daggerheart content, these requirements seem even more straightforward. Again, not legal advice, read it yourself, but according to my interpretation, you base your work on the SRD, not the core rulebook. If it's non-commercial, just paste in the copyright and attribution, and if it's commercial, you also paste in this other piece of text from point 2 on your title page, and you include those 2 logos on your front cover. So, will all writers do this? Well, right now, the current largest third-party Daggerheart publication, City of the Black Rose on Kickstarter, which looks very cool and made with professional quality, this product does not have those required logos on the cover. Though to be fair, it's just a cover mock-up, so maybe that's fine. However, they also do not include the required copyright and attribution in their 1-page non-commercial Daggerheart campaign frame sample. And yet, this Kickstarter is being advertised in at least the first 3 episodes of Critical Role's Age of Umbra campaign. So right out of the gate, forget about enforcing the license for hundreds of creators who didn't read it. Critical Role is promoting a product that currently doesn't seem to be following their own license requirements. And I'm not trying to call anybody out here, but that is my interpretation of what you need to do. What I need to do, what I needed this point for, was to point out that the clickbait scandal people completely ignored all of these unusual requirements for video and podcast and these apparent contradictions, and instead, they focused the scandal on something completely hypothetical. That's why I said the only part of this license that I'm apprehensive about is the termination stuff. But When I search my feelings, I know it to be true that my apprehension stems entirely from what D&D tried to do with the OGL, which was said to be perpetual. So that made the idea of termination seem ugly and manipulative. But really, Daggerheart is clear up front that they can terminate or change the license. So all I'd have to do is just occasionally check for new versions of the license online if I were working on my own Daggerheart book. And maybe I'd have to update my past Daggerheart works to align with new versions of the license, but I'm not clear yet on whether or not that's actually required. And even still, termination is not the main part of this license being contorted by the outrage mill. And we can take a step back. There are two parts of this license I've since become aware of that actually seem kind of predatory and like a real hindrance to the game. They are, one, that you must pay Darrington Press's legal fees should a lawsuit arise. That is highly unusual because typically each side would just pay their own fees as you'd expect, but still never going to happen. And two, you cannot create any sort of digital tools for Daggerheart. That just seems like they're hurting themselves because this game with cards and tokens and whatnot would be easier for more people to play and get into if they had more options for digital tools. But can you believe it? Even those 2 points are not the scandal here. Like I said at the beginning, aiming the pitchfork in the wrong direction. So here we go. The big Daggerheart license scandal that makes it worse than the D&D OGL is that if Darrington Press publishes something that happens to be similar to that Daggerheart Ancestry you published on DriveThruRPG and made $50 on, you can't sue them or claim that they stole your work. Because they didn't steal your work, man. This is the most foolish hypothetical argument that could only come from people who I guess believe that they will design something so amazing that Darrington Press, or in this pipe dream, probably Matt Mercer himself, will find it online and be so stunned by the quality of the design that he copies and pastes it from that silly peasant's PDF, which was probably missing the proper logos and attribution, then sell it himself for millions of dollars that should have been theirs. That ridiculous scenario is being feverishly argued about in comment sections and forums because a handful of creators made it seem like an actual problem. So yeah, this is golden standard number 4. No, the Daggerheart license doesn't claim ownership of anything you create with it or ever require royalties like the OGL tried to do. Is the Daggerheart license perfect? No, but any comparison to the OGL controversy is at best a gross misinterpretation. And sure, it can be fun and funny to make a mountain out of a molehill in RPG news. After all, RPGs are supposed to be about fun and games, so satire and hyperbole have a place here. That's the shift I welcomed in my last video about this genre of RPG content. But we all have to be more responsible about making and feeding into what I will call crying wolf scandal content. Because if we turn every molehill into a mountain, then when, not if, but when something worth railing against inevitably happens again to the RPG community, we will all be so callous to the idea of a scandal and so busy arguing amongst ourselves in comment sections over nothing that we will be unable to organize like we did against the OGL changes, and this time we will lose, and the games we love will become less fun because of them. So if you understand that, and the fact that it is not as fun or easy to be the guy who untangles outrage mill drama, then I hope you'll consider supporting what I do with a like, a comment, or perhaps even joining my Patreon or YouTube membership for bonus videos. But thank you for watching, keep building, and for God's sake, go play an RPG.